If there's ever a time you want to be able to perform simple calculations between two or more fields in your report, or even with another value, or a combination of both, here I want to show you how you can create that custom calculated field. And in this example, I'm looking at my purchasing info report, where I have a list of all the computers grouped by department and their purchase price over to the right-hand side. So let's say that I want to get all new computers. And let's do this. Let's go ahead and create a custom calculated field over to the right. That could be like our proposed purchase price for the new computers, where it's going to be based upon the original price and maybe with an increase by 5%. So how about if we do that? We create a custom calculated field that multiplies the original price by 5%. Sound good? Alrighty. To do that, let's come up here and right click on the tab, go to the design view, and let's do a quick overview of the design view, what we got here before we create that custom calculated field. So up at the top in the report header section, we got the title of the report. So it's heading the report. It always appears on the first page up at the top of the report, nowhere else. Report heading, heading the report, report header. And then down below the page header, which has all the labels that will appear at the top of each page in the report, or heading each page, page header. Which brings up a good point. In the design view, how can you tell the difference between labels and data fields or text box fields? Just by looking at them, because the labels will be transparent and the text boxes will be filled in with white. So we've got all the labels here, which you hardly can read, but I can kind of make it out. And so that's heading up at the top of each page in the report. And then below that, we've got it grouped, all the records, or the details, and there's the details, the records, before it actually lists the records. It's going to find out which records belong to which group and group it by, well, by the department name. So after it groups them by department name, then at the end of each group, you got a code here, but also you get the sum total of the purchase price of all those computers that are in that department. And then at the bottom of each page, or the page footer, you have the now function, which means it's going to pull in today's date. In fact, you can learn more about the now function and a whole plethora of functions in my Excel training videos, so you may find that helpful when it comes to creating your custom calculated fields to know how to write formulas and work with functions. And then over to the right, you've got, let's see, page like 1 of 2, or however many pages you have in your report. And then below that, at the end of the report, or at the report footer, you get the grand total of all the purchase prices of our computers. Now, to go ahead and create that custom calculated field, we have to add a blank text box or data field where we can write the formula within that blank or unbound text box. It's called unbound because it's not bound to anything like these other text box fields. They're bound and pulling in this data. Well, let me show you. To add that text box field, come up here on the Design tab, go to the Controls group. And my screen resolution's not that high, so I have to click on the Controls drop-down arrow to see the controls, and that's what I'm looking at right there, the text box field or the data field. But it's called the text box field, so we'll start calling it that. So click on it, and when you move down into the grid, you can see that it has that icon next to the plus sign, plus meaning that when you click, it's going to instantly insert the text box or the data field, not only the data field, but also a label field, so you can have, like, well, these here, a label for its corresponding data field, manufacturer ID for the data field manufacturer ID, and so forth. So let me go ahead and scroll over. As long as I don't click on the grid, I'm good. And so you can see I still got the plus sign for the text box. You can add it wherever you want. It's just that I want to add it in the details section first, so it adds the text box field, and then it'll also add the label there, but then I can move the label up into the page headers, so we have our labels separate from our data here. So, or you can put it up here, but then you have to take the text box, the data field that we're going to perform the custom calculation in, and move it down below. So I'm just going to go ahead and click it in the details section. When I click on it, boom, adds the unbound text box and its corresponding label. So we want the label up here with all the other labels that's heading up at the top of each page with the records appearing down below. And again, it's called unbound because it's not pulling in anything. It's not bound to anything. Like these other text boxes, this one's bound to pull in the manufacturer ID and only that, as well as this one to the date received and so on. But when we create our custom formula in here, as it were, to multiply that field by 5%, then it's going to be bound. well, bound to that formula or that expression. So before we work on that, let's go ahead and click on the label here, the label field. And I want to move it up here into the page header section, so we've got the labels up at the top of each page and all the data down below. And to move it up there, you would think that, well, if you hover over the border when you see a four-way arrow and you click and drag it, just like we learned in earlier training videos in the design view, that when you move either the label or its corresponding data field, text box field around, it moves the other. They both go together. So that ain't going to work. So then you might think, well, hey, I remember you said to move them independently, just go ahead and click on that little gray box in the upper left-hand corner, in this case for the label. Well, yeah, when you click and drag, it moves independently, but it won't allow you to get outside of this detail section up into the page header. So that ain't going to work. So what you can do is hover over the border until you can see a four-way arrow, right-click, and go ahead and cut. And then come up here and right-click in the page header section and paste. When you paste it, it always pastes it over to the far left-hand side. So let's scroll over, and there you go. Go ahead and hover over the border until you can see a four-way arrow. Click and drag that over to the right, and then we can scroll back, and great. So the text within that label, when you click inside of it, is text 18. Well, that's not what I want. I want proposed purchase price. So I can go ahead and type that in there, and well, I'll just type in a bunch of stuff. And then when you're done, hit enter. You can do it that way, or another way is to bring up the property sheet. So to bring up the property sheet for what you have selected here, you can do it one of many ways. You can either hover over the border of what you've got selected and double click really fast, brings up its property sheet, the properties of what you have selected. So the selection that I have is label 19, which, by the way, it's another way to find out if you have a label selected or a text box. So I have a label selected, and it's called label 19, and that's the name of it. And the text within it, or the caption, is a bunch of gobbledygook. Okay, so you can bring up the property sheet that way, close out, or you can right-click on the border and go down to Properties, brings it up, close out, or just come up here on the Design tab to the Tools group, and there you go, Properties. Click on it, and there we go. Let me scroll over. So you got two names that you're working with, basically. Well, one's called name, the other one's called caption. And the reason being that it's called name is for the design view. So you can have one name when it comes to designing and working with your fields here in the design view, and another name for the front-end user view, or what they're going to see. So how can that be helpful? Well, for the front-end user, I don't want caption gobbledygook, so I can either click in here and change it, or come over here in its properties and delete all that and call it PP price. So for proposed purchase price, then when I hit enter, I don't know if you can see that. It's very legible here because of the transparency, but it's updated. And so that's good for the front-end user. But for the back-end user, well, one way to look at this is that, let me scroll over here. When I'm looking around and I'm thinking, oh man, I've got a lot of labels all over here. I can't find, what is the proposed purchase price label? I want to jump right to it. Well, I could try to read these labels. The transparency makes it a little bit difficult. Or I can come over here into the property sheet and click on the drop-down arrow and go to label 19. I mean, that's the one that we have selected, but label 19 doesn't mean anything to me. But that's the generic number it gives it with the prefix label, so you know that you're looking in the label area here, as opposed to looking for data fields or the text box fields with the prefix text. So if I select text 16, what's that? Well, it selects it down below right here. That's the now function. So if I want to get back to my proposed purchase price label, I can scroll over until I can find it. And, you know, again, if you've got a lot of labels and you just want to jump right to it, you don't want to squint your eyes to get through the transparency, well, I think it's easier to bring up the property sheet. Like if you close out and just come up here and click on property sheet, then click on the drop down arrow, look in the labels because there's the prefix. And if I remember right, it's 19, select it, it selects it. Great. But to make it easier on me, it's a label, right? So I'll leave the prefix alone and I'll call it 2 P's and a price. So for the proposed purchase price, hit enter. Makes it a lot easier. So I'm out here gallivanting around and selecting other fields, rearranging them, and I'm like, okay, where's that purchase price? I want to jump right to it without having to scroll all around to find it. It's right here. Click on the drop down arrow and look in the labels because there's your prefix. And once you're in the label group, then go to the one that has the correct name, the one that you're looking for, for PP price, proposed purchase price. Jumps right to it. Great. And then down below we got our Unbound text box. How about we give that a name? Over in the property sheet, it's known as text 18. So you got the prefix of text, meaning that that's a data field as opposed to, well, label. So I'll leave it as text, but I want to change because I don't know what 18 is. So if I come after it, delete the 18 and call it the PP price, and then hit enter, updates it so that way when I'm gallivanting about in my report, I'm scroll over here and I'm like, okay, what's the quickest way to find it and get right to it? You got the property sheet open. Fabulous. Go ahead and click on the drop down arrow. You want your text boxes. Scroll down to the T's for text. What's the name of the text? It's the PP price. Jumps right to it, right? You just have to scroll over to see it. Okay, cool. So in the Unbound text box, you want to go ahead and type in a formula that will take the purchase price field and multiply it by 5%. Now there's a couple of ways you can go about doing this. You can either go ahead and click right in the Unbound. And if you know how to write formulas, then just go ahead and start typing. But since maybe you don't, or there's something to look out for, let's not do that just yet. Let me click outside of it, go back and select it, and come over here in the property sheet. So we have the name of the text box, and then down below you have the control source. The control source does one of two things basically. It either lets you bind it to a field within the table like that this report's based upon by just clicking on the drop down arrow and selecting that field. But I already have all these fields. I think all of them, and I don't want to duplicate it, and so instead of doing that, let me hit the escape key. I can go ahead and type in the formula here. So you can type it within the Unbound text box, type it here, or we did this in an earlier training video, or it's like this, in that you can come over here to the far right and click on the ellipsis button or the build button. When you click on it, does this expression builder look familiar from the query training video that we used it in? Oh good, you watch my training videos. Okay. So you can see down below, examples of expressions includes the name of the field in square brackets, and then you can use the plus to add it to another field and so on, or in this case, multiplication, use the asterisk. So to get started, you can also, well, if you like, you can type it in here, but if you want to go ahead and build it by using the elements and categories and values down below without typing it in, well, let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing is we're looking in the purchasing info report, and here's a list of all the fields that are in that report. And so what we do is you scroll through here to find the purchase price field, which remember it's that field right here. Okay, that's the original price and it's right there. Once you select it, well, you can go ahead and do the expression value, but I just want the field, so I'll double click. There you go, in square brackets, that field, because we want to take that field and multiply it. So we need to add the asterisk. You can type it in, or you can come down here to the operators, and that's the technical term for these expression values. And it says all, and then you can come over here, find the asterisk, double click, adds it, and then we want to multiply that. In case if you're not familiar with the expression values, well, you got the plus sign means addition. When you have the forward slash, it means divide, and of course the asterisk is to multiply, and the little sign there is to minus. But in any case, let's go ahead and multiply this by 5%. So we want to multiply it by 1.05. So when it's done, it'll have the purchase price plus the 5% on top of it. So take a look at that, memorize it, go ahead and click Okie dokie. And when I click OK, notice that over here in the control source field, it adds that formula. But what I didn't add was the equals. Now that's important. When you use the expression builder, it'll add it for you. But if you don't use it and you just type it in and you forget to put in the equals, it's going to have a fit. And you can see over here, well, it used to be the Unbound text box, but now it's got a formula in it, so it's not going to say that it's unbound. And you can click in there and start making changes. But let me click off. And in fact, let me go ahead and select that and click in here and delete all that. And then hit enter. So now it's unbound. Okay, so let's go ahead and either come in here or come over here in the property sheet in the control source and just type it. So you can type it in here. And to type it in there, remember, you got to have square brackets. Purchase price, close square brackets. Now, the field name is not case sensitive. So the purchase price field was, well, there we go. We'll look at the text box. You can see that it's uppercase for the P's here. Well, I don't have it here, but it's okay. It's not case sensitive. So purchase price, then asterisk, 1.05, hit enter. Now you want to hit enter to make sure that Access checks your work, and if it likes it at least at one level, then it doesn't give you the raspberries. But if it accepts it and has another issue with it, you can see over here, the other way to check it is you get this little tag. When I hover over it, it says this control has an invalid control source. What does that mean? Click on the tag. It says the expression must begin with an equals sign. You see, I told you to put an equals in there. The expression builder, when you click on the three dots, will add it for you, so you can't forget that. You got to type it in there, then hit enter, and then it clears the tag. So, you can type it in here. Let me delete that. Or you can go ahead and let me hit enter. And then come in here, you can type it in there. So once you get the feel for what the expressions look like, the formulas, you can just go ahead and type it in. Just make sure, of course, you enter the equals first, and then the open square bracket, purchase price, not case sensitive, close square bracket, asterisk to multiply, and then 1.05, hit enter, and it's happy. And you can see the rest of it over here in the control source. So that brings up a good point. The text box is only so big, I don't want to scroll in it, so I can bring up the property sheet and I can see more of it here. Of course, you can right click on it and zoom, and you'll see even more. Or of course, let me click cancel. You can click on the build button and it shows it there as well. So let me go ahead and click off of it. And we got what we want. We just need to check it out. And to do that, we can just go ahead and go to our report view. Come up here, right click on the tab, go to report view, and scroll over. And well, is 1700 multiplied by 5% give us what we're looking for? The 1700 plus the 5% increase, yeah, it looks good. But the problem is I don't get the formatting in currency, which we'll talk about in the next training video, formatting controls, so we don't need to go over that here. But look at that, it kind of bleeds off. So this is the report view. If I want to print this out, is it all going to be fitted on one page, or is it going to bleed over part of it into page 2? Well, let's go ahead and take a gander. Right click up at the top, go to the print preview, click on it to zoom out. Okay, there's the overall view, and you can see it's being cut off. So where's that cut off stuff going? If we go to page 2, oh, there's the rest of it. What a waste of pages. So what I want to do, let's continue. There's page 3, but then that's cut off over here, so the rest of that is over on page 4. Well, that's annoying. Let's go ahead and right click and go to the design view and close out of the property sheet and scroll over to the right. It didn't have a problem before until I added the purchase price here. So I think if I can do some deductive reasoning, these fields were here previously, and so it looks like anything beyond that, or maybe beyond that line, is going to bleed over into the second page. So I got to pull these guys back or shrink up the field, but if I shrink up the data field, it may cut off some of the numbers here for the purchase price. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's scroll back and click and drag a line through all the labels, and then hold down the shift key and click and drag a line through all its corresponding text boxes. And let's hit the arrow key several times over until the furthest one over to the right in the text boxes is about lined with the others here. All right, click off, and let's hover over the right-hand side of that grid and click and drag to bring it in. But before I bring it in, if that doesn't flag you when you go to the print preview that you may have fields bleeding over into other pages, before you go to the print preview, in the upper left-hand corner, you got this little square. When you click on it, it selects the entire report so you can bring up the properties for the report. Like if you double-click on it, you see here what it says selection type is the entire report. So you can set up the properties for the report as opposed to, well, going back to our labels, selecting that. In any case, let me go ahead and select that little square in the upper left-hand corner. And so there's the properties for the entire report, and we'll talk about that later. But what I want to show you here is that when you're up there and you get that fluorescent green triangle, well, below that you get this little tag, and it says when you hover over it that the report width is greater than the page width, possibly causing extra blank pages to be printed, and we already seen that. So if you click on that, report width is greater than the page width. In any case, you can edit the margins, remove extra space, get some of the suggestions here, but we'll go over this in greater detail in a later training video, the different ways you can work to clean up your report so you don't get these extra blank pages or part of the fields are bleeding over onto page 2. So what we need to do is come over here to the right-hand side and click and drag the grid in. And when I do it far enough, this guy, that little green triangle, disappears. So now I'm not outside of the bounds of the report where it cuts off some of these fields to put them onto the second page, creating that extra page that I really don't need. So let's go ahead and take it for a look-see and right-click on the tab, go to the print preview. Okay, so there's page 1. I've got the lines on the other side of the proposed purchase price field, so it doesn't look like it's being cut off. And the best way to find out is to go to page 2, and there's the rest of it. Oh, that's nice. The only other thing that I have a concern about, let me right-click and go to the design view, is the alignment of these things. Because look at this field right here. It's down, it's not aligned to the top of these other text box fields, and it probably needs to be closer. So if I click and I see if I try to eyeball it, that may not work. As we learned in an earlier training video, you can use the alignment feature, which allows you to select one text box and hold down the shift key and select the other. And then when you use the alignment feature, if you align to the top, it'll take the one closest to the top and take the other one and bring it up to align it with it. Or if you said line bottom, the one that's furthest to the bottom, it'll bring all the other ones that are selected down to the bottom. And so to bring up that feature, after you select the text boxes that you want to line off of, then right-click on the border of one, and then go down to align, and we say align top. So it took this one that was below the proposed purchase price and aligned it to the top of the other one. That's nice. And I think those are already aligned. Let me click off. And if you want to get these really particularly close to one another, the label, because maybe that one's a little bit too far to the left as opposed to that one, and you want to bring that one further over to the left, well, select that one, hold down the shift key, select that one, and then right-click on one of them to align, and let's align left, and it nudges it over to align up with this one, which was furthest to the left to begin with, between the two labels. And now when I go ahead and right-click to the print preview, I can click to zoom in. That report looks, to me, a lot better. And there's some other things I could change about it, like removing the lines around the borders, but we'll deal with that in later training videos after you create your text boxes and you're like, hey, I want it like these others, no lines. A lot of different things we can do to clean up a report we'll go over in later training videos. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for only $2 a month, you get online access to all my training. Or for downloads and DVDs, please visit me at dreamforce.us.